Kate Milavalcha, welcome to Psychics and Psychos. This is a new case that we're going to be looking at. And I had the dubious honor of researching the background of Mr. Charles Manson. And actually, it turned out to be very interesting. So how this is going to be set up, I don't think I'm going to do just one introductory video. There's so much, and I found some very interesting things on the on YouTube videos that I want to share. So today we're going to look at his childhood, his early prison life. It's not easy to summarize Charles Manson. His personality, mental state, criminal behavior are so convoluted, such a Gordian knot of pathology, that it's impossible to just be real straightforward and give you chronology and we're done. Now, I'll tell you right from the very beginning, there's a lot of ugliness in this story. He had a problematic upbringing. He had a problematic childhood, a lot of crimes, and I'm going to have to talk around some of them. I'm not going to be able to be explicit. I think we all kind of know the story, right? When we get to the actual famous crimes, infamous, I should say, excuse me, which won't be in this first video, I am not going to be really graphic. There's no need. We've all heard this story a million times, a trillion times. And it doesn't serve the purposes of looking at his psychopathology, only to a certain extent. So we will look into things that you might not think we need to dwell on, like his association with some famous people. Yeah, already I'm in the knot here. It's very complicated. I hope you'll stay with me. I found it interesting in a disturbing way. So let's just get right to it, shall we? So the childhood and early prison life of Charles Manson. He was born November 12th, 1934. That's a long time ago. He was called Charles Miles, maybe Millis, I'm not sure, Miles Maddox. His mother was 16. Her name was Kathleen. She'd been born in Ohio, but her family had moved to Kentucky. His father was 23. Now this is the background of people we're dealing with. His father's first name was Colonel. It wasn't a title. It wasn't a military position. His first name was Colonel Walker Henderson Scott Sr. He was 23. He was a Kentucky con man. So he romanced 16-year-old Kathleen. He told her he was a colonel in the military. When she got pregnant, he said, "Oh my God, I've been called back to the Army. I'm on assignment with the Army." And off he went and he abandoned her. Not funny, but yeah, I just cannot believe that. So she filed a paternity suit, and this took a while to get through the courts. It wasn't until 1937. So at that point, Charlie was already 3 years old. But it got through the courts, and somehow he got off the hook. So I don't understand it. Her mother, whose name was Nancy, forced her to raise Charles, keep him and raise him in the Nazarene church, which was off the charts crazy. So she realized what her life was going to look like. So partway through her pregnancy, she married a guy, a 25-year-old named William Eugene Manson. They got married in August. Now, mind you, Charles was born in November. So Manson took his last name. This William Manson was a laborer at a dry cleaner's. She would frequently go off on drunken sprees with her brother, Luther. This This is just unbelievable. They'd go on drunken sprees. She'd leave newborn Charlie with her family, with her mother, her aunt, her uncle, friends. And she'd be gone a lot. She was doing sex work. And with her brother, I don't know, they would, well, we'll talk in a minute about what they got in trouble for. I don't know where William was during all of this. But in April of 1937, he divorced her. And he accused her of gross neglect of duty. We can only imagine what that meant. In August of 39, she and her brother Luther were caught red-handed. They had a little scam going on. They'd go to a bar. They'd pretend to be a couple. Already it's a little scary. They'd go to a bar drinking, and they would sweet talk, lure a businessman, and she would actually go in and romance him, and Luther would be hiding outside, and she'd entice the guy outside, and Luther would whack him over the head, I guess, and they'd steal his money, and that was their job. Charlie's mother, at one point in this career, was in a bar and didn't have any money, hadn't had much hunting luck that night, and tried to trade the infant Charlie for a pitcher of beer. So eventually, by the time Charlie was 5, they got caught, Kathleen and Luther. They went to prison for 5 years. So Charlie was sent to live with his Bible thumper grandmother, Nancy. He claimed that he says, I loved my mom. She was perfect. She made me do things for myself. She taught me by making me translate. She completely neglected him. He was always in trouble. He was always in trouble from the time by the time he officially was living with Nancy at the age of 5, he was already in trouble all the time. And he blamed everybody else. He never took accountability. He was bounced around between Nancy and an uncle who was a Bible thumper, who made him wear a dress to school. I don't remember why he did that, but I do remember that story was repeated often, that his uncle was sadistic. Kathleen showed back up out of jail when he was 8. She got a job at a grocery store. She remarried a guy called Lewis, and Lewis had no patience for this little juvenile delinquent, Charlie, who lied, stole, and ran away at the age of 8. At the age of 9, he set his school on fire. He had an enormous record of truancy, petty thefts, a junior crime spree. At the age of 13, he was sent to Gibalt, I'm not sure quite how to pronounce it, school for boys. It was characterized as a school for male delinquents. I can't believe I have to say this. It was run by priests. So you know what was going on. They were really into corporal punishment. He ran away. He slept rough, which is, he's only 13. He went on a mini crime spree. He tried to go back home to live with his aunt and uncle, but his mother turned him back to Gibalt boys' school, delinquent school. I had a really hard time getting the chronology of all the reform schools he was in the proper order, because he was back and forth, and so many crimes, so many reformatories. In 1948, he was in Gibalt, and then in 10 months after being returned to it, he ran away again to Indianapolis in a stolen car. He got a gun and engaged in armed robberies. He robbed a grocery store, got a cigar box with $100 in it, which allowed him to rent a room in Skid Row and buy some food. He got a job delivering Western Union, and he did more theft to augment his income with Western Union. In 1949, he got arrested and sent to Boys Town. That lasted 4 days. And then with friends, he and his friend ran away, went to his friend's uncle, who apprenticed them in his crime sprees. This is in Peoria, but after 2 weeks, the boys got caught and they got sent back. They got sent to a new place, a hardcore juvenile facility, at which there was a lot of physical abuse, called Indiana Boys School. Now, I mentioned that there are things that I'm not going to talk about in great detail. I'm going to leave that for you guys to extrapolate from context. I know you're smart. I know you know what I'm hinting at. Older boys were preying on younger boys. Charlie, in recollecting this in later days, said, "Oh, it's no big deal." So this poor kid was already desensitized to a level of mistreatment that defies belief. Then he was sent, this was a very strict reform school in Plainfield, Indiana. This is the Indiana Boys School. The staff participated in the crimes of the older boys against the younger. So he created what he called the insane game. He faked having seizures or being possessed to scare away the people that were predatory upon him. He ran away from this facility 18 times. In February of 1951, with 2 other boys, they escaped. They robbed a gas station, stole a car, and started to drive to California. So this is crossing state lines, grand theft auto. It's a federal crime. And they were arrested in Utah. He was sent to the National Training School for Boys in Washington, D.C. They tested him. He was illiterate, but he had an IQ of 109, which is above average. Not that far above average, but above average. He wasn't completely stupid. His aunt agreed to take him when he was paroled, but 1 week before he was due for his parole hearing and would have gotten out, he was caught assaulting a younger boy at knife point. And he was then sent to kind of the end of the road, the Federal Reformatory in Petersburg, Virginia, and then on to a maximum security facility in Chillicothe, I think is how it's pronounced, Ohio. Anyway, 1954, he was released, sent to live with his aunt in West Virginia. Well, she was very conservative, very religious, one of the Nazarenes, and he was like a fish out of water. He got involved with a young waitress. Now, I read 2 different things, a young teacher, a young waitress. Take your pick. Some young girl who was 16. And of course, she got pregnant. Her name was Rosie Willis. They went to California in a car that he stole to be with his mother. And they got caught. And I didn't specify, did they get caught with a stolen car? Did they get caught with him breaching his probation? I mean, they gave him 5 years probation. He had other charges in Florida. There's no explanation what those were from, but because he didn't show up for a hearing in Florida, because he was in trouble in California, they revoked his probation that let him out early, and he got 3 years in Terminal Island. Now he's with the big boys. Rosie gave birth to Charles Jr. in April of 1956, and they lived, the baby and Rosie lived with Nancy, Charlie's mother. By 1957, she stopped visiting Charlie because she had a boyfriend. Charlie, in jail, tried to steal a car. I had no idea how he went about that. And he wanted to try to escape. And he did this fewer than 2 weeks before his parole hearing. His parole was denied. He got 5 years of probation added to his 3-year sentence. So they didn't let him out. He still had to stay in for the 3-year sentence, and they added probation at the end of it. Rosalie divorced him. Before he was let out, he befriended. Now, this is where Charlie Manson came into his own. He befriended pimps, and he learned their tricks, how to recruit girls with low self-esteem, with issues from their father and trauma, who were dependent on a slightly decent guy, girls who could take a beating, girls stuck in a cycle of worthlessness, vulnerability, and need. He learned to recognize them and how to exploit them. He also, simultaneously, the prison providing him with this, took a course in Dale Carnegie, how to win friends and influence people. That's exactly what you want Charles Manson to learn about. It appealed to him because he had a burning desire for sex and greatness, and he liked Carnegie's approach. He used it to figure out how to use sex for power and influence. He learned that if you make people think that what you want is really what they want, you'll be fulfilling their dreams and getting what you really want. The pimps gave him a vision, and Carnegie gave him a blueprint. He also learned how to play the guitar. He got out 7 months early on parole and became a pimp. He had a girlfriend. I'm trying to be careful about the words I use. He helped a girl that he befriended, a 16-year-old rich girl who was troubled. He helped her find work, if you get my meaning. In 1959, he forged a U.S. Treasury check, which he stole from somebody's mailbox, and he got caught, but the charges got dropped when the girlfriend, Candy Stevens, one of his girlfriends, because he had more than one, named Candy Stevens, went to court and testified and cried because she wanted to marry him, and he's so young, and please don't put him in jail. He got a suspended sentence. I can't believe it worked. He got a suspended sentence, and they did get married. He took her and a couple other girls to New Mexico so they could work. And he got caught violating the Mann Act, which is transporting minors across state lines for that kind of work. In 1960, he got 10 years for forgery and for that treasury check. But his sentence, okay, oh wait, I can't keep track of his crimes. So he had a suspended sentence of 10 years for the forgery of the check. But he got caught violating the Mann Act. And when he went to court for that, they revoked his suspension and he went to prison for 10 years for the forgery. It's very complicated. So he got sent to McNeil Island in the state of Washington. Now he's been in D.C., but two different Washingtons. At the age of 26, he'd been institutionalized. He was okay with prison. He'd been in prison more than half his life. He liked to get into people's heads. He says you can get anything you want to figure out how to get into somebody's head. He took guitar lessons from gang leaders and bank robbers. He learned how to do hypnosis. He practiced hypnotizing people. He filed away information on oh, this is interesting. He met a guy in prison who was in prison for trafficking drugs. His name was Phil Kaufman. He worked at Universal as a music producer. Well, Charlie met up with him and he filed all the information he could about this guy because Charlie believed he had talent. And of course, this Phil Kaufman told him he had talent. You want friends in prison. You don't tell the crazy guy that he's no good on the guitar, right? So he said, yeah, Charlie, I'll make you a star someday. He learned to regret that. Charlie met up with Scientologists in prison, and the prison system encouraged it. They regarded it as a religion, and anything that kept the prisoners busy, so they encouraged it. He cherry-picked whatever was useful to him. He liked their moral relativism. He believed that we're all immortal, that death is meaningless, that experience transcends this body, which is a trap. Our life on this planet is a trap. He was a big Beatles fan. They were his inspiration. More about that later. He knew that if he could play the guitar, it would attract teenage girls, and that's why he was really into it. In his prison file, it says, quote, he has a tremendous drive to call attention to himself. In 1963, Candy divorced him. She also accused him of paternity for Charles Luther Manson. Awful lot of Charlies in this family. He tried to stay in prison when he was up for parole. And he told the prison, I've been in here all my life. I've been incarcerated half my life. He didn't want to leave. He says, the prison is my home. Don't make me go. They said, sorry, it's not a hotel, and they kicked him out. So on May 21st of 1967, he was released with nowhere to go. So now we're going to talk about, that was his childhood and his early prison stints. Now we're going to talk about the family. So we headed for Berkeley because he was astute, and we're talking 1967, moving into the summer of love. Berkeley was a hotbed. It was where all the girls were. So he went to Berkeley and he crashed with an ex-prisoner, leaving the state where he was released was a parole violation, and then associating with former prisoners was also a parole violation, but he did it anyway. He wandered the UC Berkeley campus by day, and he slept in buses at night. He'd get woken up at the end of the line, and he'd get on another line and sleep. UC Berkeley was the epicenter of the youth counterculture revolution. So he managed to get supervision of his case. You can talk about a manipulator. He got his caseworker moved from whoever was taking care of it in where he originally was released to a guy called Roger Smith. And this gets really interesting. And I would just like to take a little moment to recommend, what did I do with the book? Where did I put it? Oh, for heaven's sake. Oh, here it is. Recommend a book that has had very mixed reception. Some people think when it came out, I think it came out quite a while ago. Oh, 2019. That's funny. I covered this book on my channel. It may or may not still be there. This book is called Chaos. Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. This is a really, really interesting book. And here's how the CIA and Charlie Manson tied together. So he is assigned a guy by the name of Roger Smith, who was a criminologist, a doctoral student, doing research, and also was a federal probation officer. Interesting, isn't it? At Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. Haight-Ashbury was the neighborhood of San Francisco, the epicenter of the summer of love. Every runaway, drug addict, mentally unstable, lost child was hanging out in Haight-Ashbury. And this guy was put up. Okay, so he's a doctoral student, I'm assuming at Berkeley. That's a lot of work. But what job did they give him? They assign him as a federal probation officer at this free clinic where all the hippies go, and give him money from the CIA and the National Institute of Health to study the effects of LSD and methamphetamines on counterculture patients at the clinic. The patients at the clinic who did not know that they were unwitting subjects, including Charlie and the girls. So what was happening was these kids were going in for everything you can imagine, the wild spree that everybody was on. And he was taking advantage of their coming in for help to dose them with LSD or methamphetamines and then study, questionnaires and sitting down and talking and observing what's going on in their lives for the CIA. And apparently, this is in mainstream reporting. I looked this up several different places, and it's not considered a conspiracy theory. It's considered to be true. So he kept a record of how these drugs affected these kids. He said after being slipped these drugs, quote, he saw changes in Manson's personality, which were the most abrupt that he had ever observed in his professional career. Manson, like many, was into the book by Robert Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land. I thought, how appropriate. Charlie quickly saw that pimping was no longer lucrative because it was a free-for-all where he was now. The new sexual revolution, things had really changed. The Bay Area was full of runaways, and many of them were looking for some sort of communal utopia. Well, enter Charlie Manson. He had no idea about Vietnam, hippies, race relations. He did have an opinion coming from Kentucky and West Virginia. He thought that civil rights were an apocalyptic threat and very fearful of what they would do. But he saw all these very young girls, these runaways, many of them hungry with nowhere to live. And he shared their sense of alienation. He was a lost child too, and he knew how to recognize vulnerability. So he put this combination together. He was nurturing this nascent philosophy. It was a combination of the process church, which we're going to have to talk about at a different time. It's just, this story takes you everywhere, many, many detours. But he was into the process church, which believed, amongst many other strange things, that Jesus and Satan would be friends at the apocalypse. He was into the Beatles, free love, the Nazarene Bible, Scientology. He actually completed 150 hours of auditing. Can you imagine being a Scientology auditor for Charlie Manson? He was into Dale Carnegie, moral relativity, and at the time, he had a right-hand pal from a former prison association with Bruce Davis. And Davis had worked at the London Scientology headquarters in 68 and 69. So Charlie needed a place to sleep, and buses were just not doing it for him. So he goes to the library at the University of Berkeley. And he meets this very reserved, very shy, very quiet, kind of plain girl named Mary Brunner, who was working at the library. And she was the perfect mark. She had very low self-esteem, problematic family background. And soon he was living in her apartment with her. She was working and supporting him while he checked out the San Francisco hippie scene. There were lots of girls on LSD, willing to do just about anything. By the way, acid was cheap and it was legal at the time. Lots of unplanned pregnancies, lots of abortions, lots of sexually transmitted diseases, lots of malnutrition, lots of chronic things like tuberculosis, hepatitis, diseases of too many people living in too close quarters with too poor nutrition, not enough hygiene. It was a bad scene. Now, I should say, I forgot to mention, so I got a lot of my information from websites that talked about Charlie Manson. I got a lot of information. I've watched some documentaries. I've read some books. I read Helter Skelter a couple of different times. It's a very controversial book, by the way. I listened to Karina Longworth's multi-episodic podcast. You Must Remember Charles Manson. She has a podcast called You Must Remember This. And she does a fabulous job of digging into old Hollywood. She talks, every season, she has multiple episodes about a particular topic. The one that comes to mind is called Dead Blondes. And she talks about Thelma Todd and Jean Harlow, and there were many before that. She does a fabulous job. And her coverage of the Manson situation was really helpful. So I want to acknowledge her because I really stole a lot of information from her. She was able to collate many, many sources, and I appreciate that. But I also got it from other places. And later in our perusal of Charlie Manson, I got some fabulous psychological analyses and behavioral, like body language analyses off of the internet, YouTube. So we'll talk about that at a little bit later date. In the meantime, we're talking about Mary Brunner, who was like the first sister wife. They didn't get married. I'm joking. So lots of girls on LSD, lots of girls with all sorts of physical issues, lots of exploiters running around, a lot of mindless misogyny going on in the Hague. For example, the Diggers. Now, the Diggers were this group of people who wanted to help the hungry and the homeless. And so they set up, I want to call it a buffet, like an outdoor soup kitchen in the Golden Gate Park every day. And they fed people who were hungry. And they got food from restaurants and supermarkets and dumpster diving, and very creatively put together food for people who needed it. So this is all philanthropic and wonderful, except that the women did all the work. So there was this misogyny that was just, I remember these times, and I remember a huge issue in women that really fueled a lot of the women's movement, in part, was the fact that all this free love and equity was great, but the women were still doing the dishes and changing the baby's diapers. So anyway, there was a lot of street people, a lot of gurus, a lot of young kids with aimless, rudderless. So he liked the Diggers' methods of attracting girls with music and sort of sweet talking them. And he told them, listen, man, give up everything and follow me. Give up your ego. It's bad. So then he'd be parasitic on them. He'd let them support him. He didn't work. He let them support them. Eventually, Mary was tolerating more and more of these new girls drifting into her apartment. So this is the summer of love. How was he able to accumulate all these girls? It was the summer of love. He was just another Haight-Ashbury guru. He told them they were the reincarnation of Jesus's followers, tacitly implying who was he. The establishment, man, they were the Romans. They were the oppressors. In May of that year, he drove down to Venice in California, in LA, and he met a girl called Lynette Fromm. He told her, now this is a great line. If you hear this line in a bar, run the other way. I'm the gardener because taking care of the flower children is what I do. So she went up to Mary's Berkeley apartment with him, and by the time they got up there, the summer of love was in full bloom. Every kid in the United States wanted to be in Haight-Ashbury, and it became a gigantic tourist attraction. And they were just overwhelmed. I mean, San Francisco was not happy. This small neighborhood was overwhelmed by the huge population from across the country of hungry, homeless kids, rudderless. Manson filled a void for some of these girls. He, for example, found an old piano. Somebody gave him an old piano. He traded it for an old VW bus. And then he was able to trade that for a school bus. Patricia Krenwinkel joined Mary and Lynette, and now he had a harem of 3. Patricia let him use her father's gas card. The girls panhandled to support him. Then he met Susan Atkins, who he called Sexy Sadie. She was a former stripper. No, I'm sorry, topless dancer. There is a difference. But she was a con artist. She was absolutely a manipulator. She was able to lure Bruce Davis, who was, Mr. Scientology. She got him to join the family. He was friends with Charlie, but she got him to join the family. She was a follower of Anton LaVey, the Satanist. He met her originally looking for drugs. And then in the middle of all this, Mary got pregnant. Eventually, around the same time, he kept bringing them in and bringing them in. They had like 18 to 20 girls living in Mary's apartment. All of them test subjects of the clinic without knowing it. He traded the VW bus for a school bus, and they all went to Los Angeles. This was the master plan. Now it was time to be a rock star. So in April 15th of 1968, Mary gave birth to Valentine Michael in a condemned house that they were squatting in. So it's said by some doctors that Manson was trying to reprogram these girls, kind of taking his example from Smith, the researcher for the CIA, from Scientology, from these the hypnosis techniques from Dale Carnegie. He was trying to reprogram them with LSD and sex. And he wanted to turn them into empty vessels that it would accept anything from him, while they were supposedly having these parties, right? And he would pass out the LSD. He was giving them large doses and taking little teeny tiny bits himself. He was really smart about it. I mean, wily about it. The girls that were in his group now included 14, 15, not sure, year old Ruth Ann Morehouse, whose cult member parents were fine with her taking off with Manson. They were followers of Wavy Gravy, who is not just a kind of ice cream. He was, what was the name of it? Mr. Woodstock. In July of 1968, they crashed the bus in a ditch, and somebody came to investigate this crashed school bus, and they found all of them inside naked, sleeping in the bus, including Mary and this newborn baby. Charlie was arrested for drugs on drug charges, but he got released 3 days later. And then they met Dennis Wilson. I think I will stop here because, no, I think I'll keep going. I have a little bit more about Dennis Wilson. And this is very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about Manson's musical talent. He harbored the delusion that he would be a great musical star. They told him that in prison to stay on his good side. In part fed by these false encouragements from Phil Kaufman, Manson thought that his music would change the world. He was 34 years old. He had no job. He had no real relationships. He had an extensive criminal history. But he believed his destiny was fame and fortune. So when he met Dennis Wilson by chance, he thought that was fate intervening, as it would. Wilson fed his fantasies for a while, and Manson used these cute girls to lure these rich, prominent young men in Hollywood. So 23-year-old Wilson was part of the Hollywood establishment. He was one of the Beach Boys. And sad to say, by the time this came about, the Summer of Love, the Beach Boys were already getting a little bit old, a little passé, a little bit oldies. They were kind of the early rock and not the counterculture rock. They were clean cut. They looked like the Kingston Trio. Remember the Kingston Trio? And they wore collared shirts, and they just looked all... They changed. They did change their appearance, and they were all about surfing USA, you know. Actually, Wilson was the only one who surfed. The others really weren't into the beach. But music was changing very, very fast. The revolution had a huge effect on Hollywood. In Hollywood, even the elite were cosplaying the revolution. They were all running around in love beads and dashikis. If you weren't an outlaw, you were part of the problem. So all these very wealthy scions of old Hollywood, they were abandoning the glamour of their parents and the studio life of Hollywood and the old crooner style music, and they were embracing this counterculture revolution. And class lines were blurred because they were hobnobbing, they were rubbing elbows with street people. Charlie was the very definition of an outlaw, and he had a lot of street cred, so he was a little bit popular for a while. The new generation in Hollywood saw themselves as outlaws. They were very grandiose, like Easy Rider glorified this big time. Dennis Hopper, Mr. Cool Dude and Easy Rider, he actually beat his wife and called himself Jesus. So a lot of normal behavior going on. Everyone was looking for a guru. Guess what Charlie was? Charlie was a guru. That's what the girls told Dennis Wilson. How did that happen? This is all about sex, drugs, rock and roll. And the day that Dennis Wilson picked up two cute hippie chicks hitchhiking near Malibu, the Hollywood elite met the real outlaws. So in April of 1968, Ella Jo Bailey and Patty Krenwinkel were picked up by a cute young guy while they were hitchhiking in Malibu. They didn't know who he was. It was Dennis Wilson. They had no idea who he was. He took them to his unique and very nice, huge log cabin, been built by Will Rogers. And this was up by the Pacific Palisades. Log cabin, I mean, it was fancy. So they did drugs with him. I wrote they probably did other stuff and soon saw that they were dealing with some serious money here and some serious luxury. So they let them stay, and they went and got Charlie when Dennis wasn't around and said, oh, we found a guy, put us up. And he said, oh, tell me about it. And they said, oh, yeah, some guy named Dennis Wilson. And Charlie about lost it. He couldn't believe it. He insisted, you bring me up to that house. So the whole entire family showed up. Dennis wasn't home. When he got home, they were already encamped in his house. They'd taken over the house. They'd taken over the yard. The first thing he ever said to Charlie when he met Charlie, it's just prophetic and chilling. He said, are you going to hurt me? So they had told him that Charlie was a guru and Dennis was a seeker. And when they told Charlie about Dennis, ka-ching, this was his golden opportunity. Wilson was very generous. He let them have carte blanche, the run of the place. He brought music people to hear Charlie play. They'd hang out and sing. He sat around and sang with Neil Young and with a guy called Greg Jacobson, who was a talent scout. More about him later. So Wilson kind of encouraged Charlie's music fantasies. He wanted him to stick around. Why? Girls and drugs. He played Charlie's songs. He let him record. He let him meet Terry Melcher. We'll talk about him more. And then he tried to let him down easy, but it's Charlie Manson. The family leached and they overstayed their welcome. Wilson has got a reputation for being pathologically generous. When he couldn't take it anymore, it was just too many people, too much chaos, too much of them using him. He packed up his stuff one day without them realizing it and rented his own apartment. He knew that the house was up for renewal of the lease and the landlord evicted the family. They took everything that wasn't nailed down that he had left behind. Anything they hadn't eaten, smoked, broken, pawned, or walked out with. Manson left a parting note for Wilson, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. Dennis told his band manager that Manson did too many really heavy drugs and that he was afraid of him. Dennis claimed he knew the family was killing people. So the family decamped for the Spawn Ranch. And I think this is where I will leave it. There's more about Dennis Wilson and the music industry, but I want to do it justice. So this is the end of video number 1. Just to make it easier for you to take a break. And we'll be revisiting this till we make our way through the entire story, and it really is a pretty incredible story. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't have any dreams about Charlie Manson tonight. Slongafoil, slancha.